Hello everybody, welcome to my course on Scratch programming. In this course, I'll take you through programming in Scratch in a step-by-step manner. Scratch is an amazingly beautiful platform developed by the MIT Media Labs. It's a great place for kids to start learning the concepts of programming and logic and build some super cool applications, for example, games, animations, and so on. Now, you can do Scratch in offline mode, which means you download the program to your PC and do programming, or you can also do programming online, which basically means going to scratch.mit.edu and writing your code. This is the mode that we will use throughout this course because this also allows us to share our work with other Scratchers and get them to look at our work. Yeah. All right. So once we, reach this scratch.mit.edu, we must click this link called create, right, to get into Scratch. Now, once I create something, I get into something called a project editor. As you see, there's something getting created for me. And I get into what is basically the Scratch work area, right? Now, this work area has three parts, right? There are maybe four parts, but three important parts. Number one, what is called the blocks palette, right? So blocks palette are all these blocks of code. For now, we will not go into this because we will be covering this in subsequent lessons or maybe later part of this lesson. But you can see there are many different kinds of blocks. For example, look, sound, control, and so on and so forth, right? So the whole idea is that from blocks palette, we take code to what is called the script area. Now this thing is called the script area, and these pieces of code, right, these blocks, right, are just like Lego blocks, right? So for example, I can snap them together to each other. I can add something here, right? So these are just like Lego blocks which kind of connect very well to each other. And if I do not want something, right, let's say I wrote this part of code, I do not like it, all I have to do is to send them back to where they came from, right? And the whole code just disappears for me, right? So it makes it very convenient for us to build applications because all we have to do is to think of these blocks like maybe Lego blocks or even jigsaw puzzles, right? So they just nicely, whatever you want, you add them here, you can modify the value maybe. And if you do not want something, just throw it back. Yeah. So it's very nice drag and drop, which makes it very intuitive for us to do something, right? Moving further right, Moving further right is what is called the stage, right? Now, stage is where all the action happens. And as you must be noticing, there is a very cute little cat here, right? Now, this cat is very special. In today's lesson, I just want you to know what this cat is called, what it does, and why is it such a good friend, right? Now, this cat is called a sprite, right? So the heroes of our Scratch program are always sprites, right? So as you can see, the word sprite here. The whole idea is that whatever code we are pulling out from here into the script area is what the scat here or any sprite later on will be doing, right? Now, you notice here also there's a small cat, right? This is basically telling that this cat here, right, is going to follow the code that you are telling it to do, right? Later on, we will add more sprites and you will see what happens here. Finally, there is two more areas which we should look at. One is this portion here. So here you see sprite 1. The way I explain this to my students is that you should think of this area here as a house for the sprites. So where the sprites live, where they basically kind of come in and rest. And this is their playground. So this is where they do their things. The script area is their playground, right? So, as you see, basically sprite comes and lives here. Later on, we will add more sprites. We can change their names. We will do that, right? But this is where all the action would happen, right? So that's the basic flow of Scratch, that you have this blocks palette, right? You have this script area and you have the stage, right? So basically to tell the cat to do something, you drag code from the blocks palette, let it do whatever, and then the cat or the sprite does whatever you tell it to do, right? Uh, Before I go further, let me rename my sprite to cat, right? Because it looks like a cat. And I think that's a very logical name for this particular sprite, right? Now, when you open Scratch, you will always see a cat sprite, right? That doesn't mean there are no other sprites, but you will see a cat sprite. And as I told you, cat sprite or any other sprite is an amazingly good friend, right? Now, why do I say that it's a good friend, right? Because the reason is very simple. Cat sprite or any other sprite is extremely obedient. Okay, and let me repeat that it's extremely obedient, right? It will do whatever you tell it to do, how many ever times you want it to do, and whenever you want it to do, right? So it's unlike your other friends with who sometimes you have maybe some disagreement, sometimes they do not agree with what you are saying. But when it comes to the cat sprite, it will always follow what you are saying, what you are asking him to do, right? Now, this is something I will keep repeating throughout the course, and I want you to, take it very seriously that the cat will repeat. Cat will, when I say repeat, cat will follow. Cat will obediently do whatever you are telling the cat to do, right? And that's true with any kind of programming. But what that means is that you have to be very careful in telling it what to do. All right. And that's the basic theme of programming. Yeah. But before we go forward, right, I said there are two more stages. I told you about one, two, three, four. Now, there's something called a stage here, and you see the word backdrops, right? So now what are these backdrops? Let's spend a little bit of time understanding what these backdrops are, right? So you notice that the cat is basically standing in this area, which is all white, right? Backdrop basically is what is in this area, right? What is in this background, right? And as you can probably imagine, and if you have seen any kind of Scratch coding, you would know that we can change the backdrop from this bland white, which is somewhat boring, to a little bit more interesting backdrop, right? In fact, many more, very exciting backdrops, right? How do I do that? It's simple. I go to this little box called the backdrop. You see a small plus here, and I get on my screen something called choose a backdrop, right? Uh, so I get a lot of options here. There is basically a lens which says, choose a backdrop. So which basically means that, Scratch itself gives me a lot of options to set a backdrop. Or I can paint a new backdrop, or I can upload a new backdrop, right? So I'll tell you each of these what this means, right? First thing first, let's start with choose a backdrop. And for those of you who are new to Scratch, who are probably seeing Scratch for the very first time, I suggest you restrict yourself to choosing a backdrop, because this is the easiest, this is the most recommended method. Yeah. So I say choose a backdrop, right? Now, the moment I do so, you notice I get a lot of backdrops, a lot of sceneries you can imagine, which Scratch has for me, right? And it's so amazing because I don't have to do any more work to get, let's say, a beautiful backdrop, right? Beautiful scenery. So all the backdrops are here, right? For instance, let's say I say, okay, look, my cat should probably live in maybe a bedroom, right? So all I have to do is to come here and click this bedroom, and you see what happens, right? Immediately you notice in this stage area, I have got a small bedroom sign, a bedroom kind of an icon. More importantly, my cat is now inside a bedroom, right? Now you may say that, look, I don't really like bedroom. Maybe I wanted something outdoors. No problem. I can go and choose a backdrop again. Perhaps we can try something from space this time, right? So maybe if I say space, maybe it will be nice. Let's say if I say my cat is standing on the moon, right? I do that and cat stands on the moon. Very simple, very intuitive, extremely beautiful. Yeah. Now, perhaps I say, no, look, moon also is not that great. Maybe I should put my cat on the beach, let's say, right? So yeah, great, no problem. Choose a beach and Sprite goes on the beach, right? Like I said, Sprite is, pretty obedient, so you have to tell what to do. Now if you tell it to go to a beach, it goes to a beach, like you just saw, right? uh, Say you find that none of this, right? So you have, as I said, you have a lot of options in this, right? And you find that not even one of this meets what you really wanted to do. Right now, in the beginning, it's very unlikely that will happen, because most of the time whatever you are imagining will likely be available here. And in fact, I suggest for the new scratchers, for the new people who are doing scratch for the first time, just stick to this, right? However, I'm just for the sake of completion, uh, I also tell you that there are two more methods to create a backdrop, which is, if you do not have anything there, so you can go and paint a backdrop, right? So I go here, paint. Now I can, maybe like I can create a square here, let's say, right? And you see the backdrop becomes a square, right? I can change its color to maybe something else, right? Let's say I change this color to this, it changes, right? But I will not spend too much time on this right now. It's good to know. We will use this in future when we'll create our own backdrops. But for now, I recommend that we'll stick to the backdrops that Scratch is providing us, because that's really good enough for now, right? So I can just go back and change my backdrop to, let's say, bedroom. Yeah, so it becomes bedroom again. Or if I wanted beach, I could make it beach again, right? Now, you also notice there are two other buttons here. I talked about upload backdrop, and there's also this one button called surprise, right? So surprise is very nice. What surprise does is that if I click surprise, it will pick a backdrop for me from all the backdrops that are available and give me one backdrop that I want, right? So let's say I click surprise, and it chose, I think this is called a classroom or something, right? Now I can try surprise again, and it gives me, let's see what it gives me, right? It gives me like a stage with some kind of music setup, right? So the whole point is there are lots and lots of backdrops for you, right? Explore yourself. Chances are you will find what you're looking for, right? So try not to you are, there's no need for you to try and get an external backdrop or paint a backdrop, but it's possible also, right? Now here you notice whatever backdrops I am putting in are all available to me in backdrops. You can let them be, or you can also choose to delete them, because you probably do not need all of them. Maybe we need only one of them, let's say. So I have to keep at least one. I'll go and set the backdrop back to the beach Malibu, right? Since I kind of like this, right? Now, before we go further, right? There's another way you can get a backdrop in, right? Again, if you do not like any of the backdrops that Scratch is providing you, no problem. You can go and say, click upload a backdrop, right? And it takes you to your PC, right? Basically, it's kind of to my PC, and say I want this chalks backdrop to come in, right? So I can put in this chalk and I say open, and Sprite is suddenly standing on a bunch of chalks, right? Sprite is extremely obedient. It doesn't complain. It doesn't say, look, I wanted to be on the beach, but you sent me to moon. Once you sent it to me, I thought I could be happy, but then again you sent me to some chalks. Sprite will follow what you're doing. But in the beginning, none of that is needed, right? So what I suggest is go to your backdrops, right? Just delete all this, right? And you can even delete this. In the beginning, just make sure you have only one backdrop, right? We will learn about changing backdrops. That's an important part of Scratch, but not just yet, right? So we will stick with just one backdrop, which is called the beach Malibu in this case, right? You can actually uh, you can basically change anything, but for my case I will go to backdrops. Right now I go back to code. Now I'm back to wherever I started. So remember, I had the cat sprite, the script area, and all I have done so far is to give it a new backdrop, because I felt it might be getting bored sitting there, right? Sitting in that white background, right? Now, just like I created a new backdrop by essentially choosing a backdrop, I could have painted, I could have uploaded, I could have chosen a surprise. I can also add new sprites, right? And how do I do that? So notice this little corner here. If I go on there, it says choose a sprite, right? So what does this do? In fact, the functionality is very similar to what happens when you choose a backdrop, right? So I say, okay, look, choose a sprite, right? Now this means that There are a bunch of sprites already available in Scratch. I am going to choose one of them, right? Now, for this particular lesson, for this and also for the new scratchers, I recommend you stick with this because while it's possible to also paint a sprite like we did or upload a sprite, for new people, you will find that more likely than not, you have a huge choice of sprites and you will find what you want, right? So let's just try, right? Let's just say choose sprites. And again, I've got lots and lots of sprites, right? So let's say I say, okay, look, cat is probably a little bit bored. Maybe I can give it a butterfly, right? So all I do is go to butterfly. Now butterfly is standing here. I can move it a little bit away. And now my cat has a friend called butterfly, right? It's called butterfly 2 because probably there are other butterflies as well. But the point is that I have been able to bring in a new sprite and put it next to my cat. Right now, again, remember, cat and butterfly are extremely obedient, so they will never complain. Why did you bring this sprite? I do not like this sprite, right? Unlike our friends, sometimes we have disagreement with them, sometimes we have fights with them, but our sprite is a friend that never complains, right? Whether it's a cat sprite or whether it's a butterfly sprite, right? So they will never complain. They'll do exactly what you want them to do, and they will coexist with each other, which means they will live with each other. So cat will also live with mouse, cat will also live with apple, cat can live with the building. Maybe I'll just show you a few more examples. Let's say I do not want this butterfly, so I can just delete this, right? And I can say choose a sprite. Let's say take something totally different. Let's say I go and choose let's say elephant is also an animal. Let's say I choose glass of water, let's say, right? So I go and choose glass of water, no problem. I can in fact go and add one more sprite, right? I can add as many sprites as I want. Maybe I want to choose, let's say, a car, right? A convertible car, right? I can put them here, right? Sprite will not complain, look, I'm scared of cars, or I don't want water. It will quietly accept that car or any other sprite has come in. Yeah, that's because it's extremely obedient. Okay, so for now, so what we saw so far is that we have this friend called Sprite, which is very nice friend, but it was feeling alone, feeling lonely. So we thought, okay, probably we can put the Sprite on, something more picturesque, maybe like a beach, for instance, right? And then we said, maybe Sprite is feeling very bored all alone, right? So why don't we give it a friend, right? So we said, okay, let's give him maybe a butterfly. Then we added a new sprite called uh, a car, or let's say a glass of water, and all of that is happening very simple. Just go and click this here, choose a sprite. Like I said, just like backdrops, you can also paint a backdrop, you can also upload a backdrop, or you can also choose a surprise sprite, right? But for the early users, for the users using Sketch for the first time, my strong recommendation is stick to choose a sprite and get the sprite that you want, right? Now, for now, I will basically um, remove these two sprites, and now I will move on to the next part of my lesson today, which is we will start giving some kind of code to our sprites, right? Now, today we will make some very simple code so that you can follow, you can understand, right? What we will do today is to make a very simple comic, right? So now, uh, comic, as you know, is something we like. It kind of conveys a story in a nice picture form. We will have what is called an animated comic. All right. So the way I do it is that first thing, on the beach, I go and add a new sprite. So remember, I go here, I go choose a sprite, and for my story, I use this thing called the beetle, right? Oops, Beetle. I like this beetle. So I say cat and beetle. So my story is very simple. It's a story of cat and beetle. And in my story, cat and beetle will be talking to each other, right? Now, when I say talk, it's like in a comic. So when you're reading a book, there is something like, there are some icons, some ways of saying and some ways of thinking, right? So I get those kind of blocks in this thing called, this area called looks. Okay. So notice there, say hello for 2 seconds, say hello, think for 2 seconds, think, maybe. Yeah, I'll talk about all of this. But before anything else, I want to show you something very important, right? Remember, there are two sprites on this, right? There's a cat, there's a beetle. In future, we may have many sprites in the same code, but they are all equally obedient. That's for sure. Also, right? Also, we can tell each sprite what to do independently, which means I can tell cat what cat should do. I can tell beetle what beetle should do, right? And it will not trouble cat saying that, look, I am doing all the work, you are not doing anything. It will not trouble cat saying that, look, you are getting the fun stuff, I'm getting the boring stuff. Nothing like that, right? And likewise for cat, right? They are extremely obedient. Now, how do you know who you are telling to do what, right? I've not yet told you how you tell them. That will be the next part. But before that, a very important thing, that I can tell my cat to do something, I can tell my beetle to do something, but how do I know who am I telling, right? And the way I tell that is, look at this corner here, right? So either look at this, or you can also look at this, right? So whichever is selected is the sprite to which you are telling something to do, right? So if I select cat, for example, if I go and select cat, then I see a cat here. And this is a very important thing. I find that students sometimes miss this and the program gets very confusing, right? So remember, always look at the top right corner of the script area. Whichever sprite is being shown here is the one who's going to do whatever is written here, right? And obviously, the way we write, as I told earlier, is by dragging and dropping. Yeah. Now, before we start giving them some instructions, I also want you to notice that there's a small green flag here, right? Now, think of this green flag like the green signal on the traffic light and the red as a stop, right? So this is really go and stop, right? So when we write any kind of code, right? When we write any game, animation, whatever, we start everything, at least in my course, to the extent possible, I start everything with this thing called, in the events, called when flag clicked. Okay. Now, this is not necessary that you start every code by when flag clicked, but it's good practice, and it's a very, it's a good practice, let's say. All right. So let's say I tell cat when flag clicked. Okay. When flag clicked, I go to looks and I say hello for 2 seconds. Now, maybe I can change this to say hello beetle for 2 seconds. Okay. So I say hello beetle for 2 seconds. Then I go to control and wait for 2 seconds. Right. Okay. Maybe I'll not do this yet. Right. So let's just say what happens here. Okay. So let's not create patterns. Let's say I say when flag clicked, say hello beetle for 2 seconds, right? Now I'm telling this to the cat, as I can see here. So what happens if I go and click flag, then cat says hello beetle for 2 seconds and then it removes it. Now notice how did it say it, right? You notice that this is just like what happens in a comic, right? So we get that kind of a box with that pointed arrow, and now cat is saying something, right? Now cat and beetle want to talk to each other, so I want to give some kind of dialogue also to the beetle, right? Now I go to the beetle code and I say once again, when flag clicked, right? When flag clicked, I should say, I wait for 2 seconds. I'll explain to you why I'm doing this. And then I say, let's say I go to looks and I say hello cat, hello cat for maybe 2 seconds, right? Now, why did I put this wait here, right? Now, remember, both the sprites are following their own instructions, right? So cat does not know what beetle is being told. Beetle does not know what cat is being told, right? But we as people who are programming this know what we are telling cat, what we are telling beetle, right? So remember, we told cat when the flag is clicked, which means when I give you a green signal, when I click this flag, say hello beetle for 2 seconds, right? Now, when somebody is talking, it's courtesy, it's polite that you stay quiet. let that person complete, and then you speak your thing, right? So in the same token, because cat is going to say this for 2 seconds, I tell Beetle, okay, Beetle, cat is talking something. Why don't you wait? Right? So I say, you wait for 2 seconds. All right. And because I know cat is speaking for 2 seconds, I ask Beetle to wait for 2 seconds. After that, I tell Beetle to say, hello, cat, for 2 seconds. Right? Again, the number two is not important. You can change it to 3, 4, 5. But the important point is, I have to be mindful of what I'm putting here for the cat, because I want to put the same number for beetle. Otherwise, it does not look nice, right? It's like talking on to each other or giving too much pause, right? So conversation doesn't go on. Now let's look at this code, right? Let's see briefly. On the cat, we have when flag clicked, say hello beetle for 2 seconds. And on the beetle, I have when flag click, wait for 2 seconds. Don't do anything. Wait for 2 seconds. Then say hello cat for 2 seconds. And let's see what happens. When I click this, hello beetle, hello cat, right? So look how beautiful it looks, right? That these two were nicely synchronized, right? In fact, it looks like they were really listening to each other. But reality is they just followed what you told them to do. Cat followed its instruction. Beetle followed its instruction, right? Now let's say I want to take this further and I tell, look, maybe cat can, think something, right? But remember, when I'm writing this code after waiting for 2 seconds, beetle is also speaking for 2 seconds, right? Maybe I'll make it 3 seconds this time, just for illustrating to you, right? Say hello cat for 3 seconds, right? Which means that I must tell my cat to wait for 3 seconds now, so that it does not sort of overlap with the beetle. It does not talk over beetle, right? Because beetle is saying something, right? So I say I'm going to use a new block called the think block, right? And this time I'm going to use think, but what should I do before that? I guess you guessed it. I should put a wait for how many seconds? 3 seconds. And simply because this is the cat code, when I go to the beetle code, I am saying say hello cat for 3 seconds, right? It could be 2 seconds, it could be 5 seconds, but whatever number I'm putting here, I must reflect it back here so that the dialogues are synchronized, right? So now see what happens, right? Now, one thing you should notice is I am using say here and I'm using think here. And you will see the difference in just a moment when I run this code. Yeah. So I say this, hello beetle, hello cat, right? And cat is waiting and then say, So cat is now dot dot dot. Maybe I should add a little bit better dialogue. You say, this beetle, this beetle looks arrogant. And why does he think so? Well, look at it, right? The beetle is not even turning back towards the cat. It's just going in its own path. So maybe cat thinks it's arrogant, right? Let's see, right? So hello beetle, hello cat. This beetle looks arrogant, right? And after that, the game stops, the comic stops. Why does it stop? Because you have not told yet. We have, rather, let's say, I should say, I have not told yet what the cat should do after this or what the beetle should do after this, right? So I can take this further. Remember, cat is thinking this for 2 seconds, right? And you notice that thinking was a bubble kind of thing, just like in a comic. So I can say, maybe the beetle also is not very happy meeting the cat in my story. So I can say, look, let me wait for 2 seconds. Let the beetle wait for 2 seconds, because cat was thinking for 2 seconds. Remember, cat here think for 2 seconds. Beetle waits for 2 seconds. And after that, maybe beetle can say, go back to looks. And I say, think, right? Probably thinks, what is this cat doing here, right? I mean, because it's not happy to meet the cat. And maybe it thinks for that for 2 seconds. And then it says, say, it's not a very friendly beetle. So it says, I am busy. Maybe I can do that for 2 seconds. And then, it also says, let me put an end to all this, and says, say, please do not disturb me. Please do not disturb me. This thing, right? Now, in any of these, right, what you're writing here is entirely up to you. That's your story, your creativity, your script, really. right? You can change any of this. The important point is to understand how cat and beetle are appearing to be synchronized with each other, right? So they're like, it's a comic where they are nicely synchronized to each other, right? And how does that happen? Now let's see what goes on here, right? Hello beetle, hello cat. Cat thinks, this beetle looks very arrogant, right? And beetle's thinking, what is this cat doing here? I'm busy, and say, please do not disturb me, right? Now, some of you might have noticed that I put say I am busy for 2 seconds, and then I said say please do not disturb me, and I did not put any time here, right? The reason I did that is because the last dialogue is something I want to keep on my screen, right? You can choose not to, but in my case, I wanted to, right? And in the process, I also wanted to show you the difference between say something for some time versus say something without any time, right? So since I said, please do not disturb me, in the end, you notice this dialogue is staying there, right? Whereas when I say I am busy, it stays for say 2 seconds and goes away, right? So that's the whole usage of say and think, right? So let's just recap what we have done, right? So we started with a blank slate. Almost all my classes, I think in all my classes probably, I will start with a blank slate and build something in front of you so that you can also follow. I basically told you about the different parts of Scratch, these code blocks, uh, the script area, the stage, and so on, and the house for the sprites. Then we went on to, add a new backdrop. I told you how to do so, right? Recommended method for new people, for new scratchers. Just choose a backdrop. Scratch has lots and lots of choices for you. Trust me. Yeah. Then we saw how we can add more sprites, right? So again, for new people, for new scratchers, just choose a sprite method. It will be fine. Yeah. We can add as many sprites, but we chose to add a beetle sprite. And after that, we looked at the code for both of them, and I told you the most important point, which is that both of these sprites or any of the sprites that you put in there are extremely obedient, are never going to fight with you, are going to do exactly what you tell them to do, right? They're never going to complain, right? But what that means is that you as a programmer has to be careful what you're telling them, right? So when, for example, when we build the comic, this simple comic, we use code from the block, mostly from the looks block, but we also use control where we use the wait and the events, right? So now the important buttons from the events and control really are when flag click, which is basically saying when this light is clicked, when this green signal is given to you. When flag clicked, do something. Now, once I click the flag, who does what depends on what code I'm telling them to do, what instructions I'm giving them. So cat instructions are given to the cat. You can see the cat here, or you can see the cat is highlighted. Beetle instructions are for the beetle. So you can see a beetle is highlighted here, and we tell beetle. And what did we tell them? Well, in this case, we use the looks block, say and think to create a comic, right? So I said when flag click, say hello beetle for 2 seconds, wait 3 seconds, think something for 2 seconds, right? And these numbers came because the beetle is told, say, wait, beetle is waiting 2 seconds because cat is speaking, cat is waiting some time because beetle is speaking, right? So as a result, we can just see it once again. So, beetle says for 3 seconds, then beetle thinks, what is this cat doing here? Say I'm busy, and says, please do not disturb me. So evidently my beetle and my cat are not very friendly. But for your comic, for or any kind of animation that you might build, you may want to choose more friendly sprites. You may choose sprites which help each other through a dialogue and so on and so forth, right? But just briefly, just see this. Hello beetle, right? Hello cat. Beetle looks very arrogant. What is this cat doing here, right? Says I'm busy and please do not disturb me. Right? So with this, I've taught you a very simple comic after having introduced you to Scratch, right? I hope you will try this on your own. You should try this on your own. Try different backgrounds, try different wait times. And for those of you who are more adventurous, you can try this extension called text speech, right? So basically, apart from just writing there, it will also talk, right? So you can explore this on your own. Yeah. But for the beginners, stick to basics and complete this comic. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you like this video. Bye bye.